In the year 2000, two entrepreneurs flew to Dallas with a simple offer. They would sell their small, unprofitable startup for just $50 million. The company they were pitching said no. That startup was Netflix. The company that turned it down was Blockbuster. Today, Netflix is worth roughly $150 billion, and Blockbuster exists as a single store in Bend, Oregon, kept alive mostly by nostalgia. This is the story of exactly how that happened. And it's not really a story about one bad decision made in a single meeting. It's a story about a business that was making too much money in exactly the wrong way to ever save itself. Blockbuster's own rise had been remarkably fast. Founded in Dallas in 1985 by David Cook, the chain grew aggressively through the late 1980s and 1990s, buying up smaller video rental competitors and expanding into a genuine cultural institution. By its peak in 2004, Blockbuster operated more than 9,000 stores worldwide and employed roughly 84,000 people. It wasn't just the biggest video rental chain in the world. For over a decade, it was essentially the only way most people rented movies at all. Renting a movie only cost a few dollars, but underneath that empire was a revenue engine most customers never thought much about. The late fee, and returning a movie late could cost just as much, sometimes more than the rental itself. In the year 2000 alone, Blockbuster collected an estimated $800 million in late fees, about 16% of total revenue. But here's the number that really explains the company's fate, because a late fee cost Blockbuster nothing extra to collect. No additional DVD, no extra staff time. Some analysts estimate those fees made up as much as 70% of the company's actual profit. Blockbuster wasn't really in the business of renting movies. It was in the business of collecting penalties, and movies were simply the mechanism that made the penalties possible. It's often said, including by Netflix's own founder in interviews and in the company's culture book, that the idea for Netflix itself was partly sparked by a personal late fee, a forgotten VHS copy of a movie that reportedly cost around $40 in fines. Whether or not that single moment fully explains Netflix's founding, the frustration behind it was universal, and it became the exact emotional wedge Netflix would use against Blockbuster for the next decade. That's the backdrop for the meeting in 2000. Netflix co-founders Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph proposed that Blockbuster buy their DVD by mail service for $50 million, with Netflix running the online side of the business while Blockbuster kept its stores. As Randolph has told it publicly many times since, Blockbuster's executives could barely hold back their laughter. Blockbuster's own CEO at the time, John Antioco, has since disputed that dramatic version of events, saying he wasn't even in the room for the pitch and that the story has been sensationalized well beyond what actually happened. What both sides agree on is simpler and just as damning. The offer was made and Blockbuster said no. At the time, saying no looked completely reasonable. Netflix had roughly 300,000 subscribers and was losing money. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores and billions in annual revenue. But Netflix wasn't really selling a mail-order DVD service. It was quietly building the infrastructure, the customer data, and the habits that would define how people watched movies once high-speed internet made streaming possible. This is where Blockbuster ran into a problem that had nothing to do with vision or foresight. Even after Blockbuster's leadership recognized Netflix as a real threat around 2004, they couldn't simply copy the subscription, no late fee model, without gutting their own profits. Late fees were the most profitable part of the business specifically because customers hated them enough to keep paying rather than remembering to drive back to the store. Removing that penalty meant removing the majority of the company's profit in one move, and no one at the top could agree on whether the company could survive making that trade. Blockbuster did eventually try. In 2004, it introduced a program called Total Access, eliminating late fees entirely and even letting customers return DVDs to stores while ordering more online at an estimated cost of hundreds of millions of dollars in projected revenue. Wall Street reacted badly to the hit on short-term earnings, and within about a year, facing pressure from investors and its own board, much of the initiative was scaled back or reversed. The company that had briefly built a real answer to Netflix walked away from it before the strategy had time to prove itself. The company that could have owned digital movie rental was, in effect, trapped by its own most profitable habit. The rest unfolded quickly by corporate standards. Netflix kept growing, and by 2007, had shifted much of its business towards streaming, of exactly the transition Blockbuster had dismissed as a niche experiment years earlier. Redbox kiosks undercut Blockbuster on price for people who still wanted a physical disc, and cable and satellite providers began offering video on demand directly into people's living rooms. By September of 2010, weighed down by more than $900 million in debt, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In 2011, satellite TV provider Dish Network bought what remained of the company for $320 million, a figure smaller than the value Netflix alone would gain in a single strong week on the stock market just a few years later. By 2014, every corporate-owned Blockbuster store in America had closed for good. Almost all of them, anyway. One franchise location in Bend, Oregon kept its lease, kept its inventory of around 1,000 titles, and kept renting movies to a loyal base of local members. As other franchise locations closed around the world through the late 2000s, the Bend store became, almost by accident, the last Blockbuster on Earth, a genuine tourist attraction today, selling branded t-shirts and hoodies to visitors who show up as much for the nostalgia as for the movies, and even renting itself out as a novelty overnight stay. What makes this story such a widely taught business lesson isn't really the $50 million rejection itself. It's what that rejection represents, a company whose most profitable habit was also the exact habit its competitor was about to make obsolete. Blockbuster didn't fail to see Netflix coming. It failed to see how trapped it already was by its own success. If you found this breakdown interesting, subscribe, because next time we're looking at a company that turned free samples into one of the most effective sales strategies ever built. See you in the next one.